in Tel Aviv. Ramy, bring our viewers up to date on what's been unfolding in the last few hours.
Sure. Hi, Catherine. Yes, in the past few hours, Israel's military spokesman did confirm that Israel is expanding its ground operations into Gaza. They've called on all residents of Gaza City to move south, and local media here and regional media are saying that this is an unprecedented attack on the Gaza Strip. We also understand that power and communication is now out across the whole entire strip. That affects more than 2 million people there. We're also hearing that Israeli forces are continuing their movement in. Our own David Martin, the CBS national security correspondent, said that he describes this as a rolling ground invasion. With that said, the IDF has come out saying that it is not, in fact, a ground invasion, but then I think this is a kind of a war of words, and it depends on whether you're on the giving or the receiving end of this. For example, Jordan's foreign minister, Ayman Safadi, just tweeted saying that Israel just launched a ground invasion, a ground war on Gaza, and the outcome will be a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions. And reports coming out from the Gaza Strip are saying that Israeli tanks have entered Gaza, and there's heavy exchanges of fire, and Israeli airstrikes have resumed in northwest Gaza.
Ramy, I want to take your reporting a step further. You've been on the ground for several days. What is it about this evening's activity that makes it different than what you've seen earlier this week?
Sure. Well, over the past few days, really, Catherine, from Wednesday night into Thursday night into Friday, there were limited raids from Israel into Gaza. From Wednesday to Thursday night, there were a column of tanks that went in, destroying barricades, destroying what they said were infrastructure by Hamas, tunnels there. And then the night after, the IDF says that there were about 250 targets that were taken out. The idea here potentially is that they were trying to soften up this line, this border between Israel and Gaza. The fact that this rolling ground invasion has now seemingly begun, it seems to say that those past few days have been working up towards this day. But when we were along the border with Gaza just a couple hours ago, we ourselves felt the escalation of Israeli artillery. We heard the near constant buzz, the screeches of warplanes overhead. Our security official with us was saying, "Listen, pause. You hear those jets? Now wait. There's going to be an explosion." And then a couple of seconds later, there were. We were just a few kilometers away from the Gaza Strip. We ourselves saw with our own eyes plumes of smoke come up over the course of about an hour.
I just want to drill down a little bit more here because you're talking about a concept I know you're familiar with because you've been reporting on the ground. It's a military concept called prepping the battlefield. And what you're describing is a series of strategic attacks over several days to weaken the defenses of the adversary. It prepares or lays the groundwork for a ground incursion, an expanded ground incursion, or ultimately a ground invasion. Talk to us a little bit more about this loss of communication and electricity power in Gaza and what that tells you about the Israeli strategy.
Absolutely. Well, on the physical side, we've talked about going in with the raids. Now, this is more of the technological side, if you will. Basically, Israel has managed to blind everyone in Gaza so that they can't reply. And to the fact of that, speaking to that, over the last 90 minutes, we haven't gotten any air raid sirens here, at least over Tel Aviv, which implies that they are trying to figure out what to do, how to reply to Israel's rolling ground invasion here. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to make sure that they are not being able to be met by any outgoing fire from Hamas from Gaza.
Let's now talk about the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in Gaza. At the top of your report, you described how the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are telling civilians to head south, but it's really not that simple. It hasn't been really for weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the death toll has been climbing pretty much every day. especially on the side of the Gaza Strip. Currently, there are more than 7,000 people that have died in the Gaza Strip. This is according to Gaza's Ministry of Health. Here in Israel, there are more than 1,400 that have died ever since October 7th. But the humanitarian disaster, catastrophe, chaos, any number of politicians, the UN Secretary General, everyone has called this a potential catastrophe of humanitarian epic proportions. They're calling on a ceasefire, but basically everything is needed. Fuel is needed, and not for vehicles, but for generators. When we look at the dark Gaza, I guess you could say skyline still, they need fuel in order to run the desalination plants for potable water. But with that said, if Hamas, if the Palestinians there can't see what they're doing, can't operate, then that is the goal of Israel's defense forces, so that they can go in and do what they need to do. I spoke to a commander of the IDF reserves just yesterday, and we were talking about the hostages that have been taken into Gaza on the order of about 200, about 220 or so. He said that hopefully they will come out alive after this, but he also hedged by saying that success above all is the priority, with the implication that Israel, that the world should prepare for some loss of life.
Let's talk about that conversation with the IDF commander a little bit more, because what we've learned through our reporting here at CBS News is that the hostages is perhaps first and foremost one of the major issues that's going to complicate any ground incursion or ground invasion. Tell us a little bit more about that conversation and what stood out to you.
Sure, absolutely. Even before we begin that, going into this 3 weeks on, there had been a feeling that there was a lull, that maybe the ground invasion wouldn't happen, that maybe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was thinking, you know what, we need to prioritize the hostages. And with more than 200 hostages, the release of a few every few days, the idea was maybe they'll wait it out. Maybe they'll try to get everyone out and come to some kind of ceasefire agreement. But now, at least in this minute, in this fog of war too, it seems that this rolling ground invasion has decided to go around that. And the issue, the concern, the problem is that many of those hostages are believed to be held in this vast network of tunnels under the Gaza Strip. By estimates, more than 300 miles long, multi-level, and they could be anywhere. And the fact that Israel's defense forces are also targeting those tunnels because, right, it's not just hostages. They're also fighters that we're seeing on our screen. And so their priority, again, as the commander said, is to take out those Hamas militants, those Hamas terrorists, and hopefully they'll get out those hostages. But again, they're also prepping for not all of them to come out.
Well, you've really underscored, I think, one of the central challenges for the IDF, which is that this is not just urban warfare, but it's happening on several different levels. There are the obviously high or large buildings that they have to deal with, then the complexities of block-to-block urban combat, and then this subterranean level that you're talking about with the tunnels. Many Americans are not familiar with these tunnels. Have you ever been inside the tunnels? Can you tell us a little bit more about that network?
No, I haven't been inside the tunnels, but people, our viewers, might remember the story of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit back in 2016. He was taken via a tunnel by Hamas that went underground from the Gaza Strip into Israeli land, and then taken back into the Gaza Strip. Now, this labyrinth, this maze, stretches so far and so extensively. No one outside Gaza, at least, really knows how far they go. But it's almost celebrated in a way from what that reserve commander I spoke to told me. He was saying, as well as a geologist who I spoke to regarding this, who's been studying this for about 20 years, they were saying that there's a kind of new tunnel culture that's happened in Gaza, and that it's become part of their part of their psyche, if you will, because it's not just what we see, the buildings and the people above ground. It's just as much what's below ground that's able to try to push back against Israel, to the degree that even some Palestinians have gotten married in these tunnels, and that schools have also taken field trips into these tunnels, not just to educate the Palestinian people, but also to celebrate that this is how they are surviving, how they're thriving, and how they're pushing back against Israel.
Ramy, one of the benefits of having someone like you on the ground is that you're able to talk to the people in Israel, in Tel Aviv, where you are, and give us some of the atmospherics. What can you share as final thoughts?
Sure. The word is traumatized, Catherine. Traumatized, terrorized. The sense of peace that Israelis here have had has been shattered. The friends that I have here, the people that we've spoken to on the ground in our reporting, they feel like they had a naivety, if you will, that they thought that they were good, that there was a status quo that had been achieved between the Gaza Strip, between Hamas, between the Palestinian Authority and the West Bank, and that was proven wrong on October 7th when those militants, when those terrorists crossed into southern Israel. There is a split with regards to the invasion. A new poll by Maariv, one of the biggest newspapers here in Israel, released a poll yesterday, and the findings are quite different from a week ago. A week ago, about 65% of respondents said that they supported a ground invasion. But now, less than 50%, 49% now support a ground invasion. The idea there potentially was that if hostages could be taken out from Gaza, that maybe there was a reason for this. But now, with what's been happening in the past few hours, regardless, these respondents, less than 50% agreeing with ground invasion, it seems that at least a rolling ground invasion has begun.
Ramy Inocencio, thank you for your live reporting from Israel.